Pokemon Dev Chapter 6 The Burning Ember. In this world, Pokemon had long been part of people's daily lives, their figures visible in every corner of the city. Harmonious coexistence between humans and Pokemon wasn't just an empty slogan, but a reality that had truly been achieved. During the week since Kyrus had arrived in this world, he'd seen plenty of Pokemon, whether it was Meowth grooming itself on street corners, Eevee being carried by girls on outings, or Pidgey dancing in the sky, he'd grown accustomed to it all. However, the problem was that during this week, aside from a few rare outings, he'd basically been holed up in his room, focused on making games. After all, rent was due soon, and if he couldn't scrape together the money, the landlord would toss him out. So during this week, he hadn't had any close contact with Pokemon. But now, he had. And this contact came completely out of nowhere. After instinctively jumping back 2 steps from the shock, Kyrus calmed down a bit and carefully observed the Pokemon before him. Candle-like appearance, deep blue flame. This was actually a Litwick, and in shiny form, no less. Why would such a ghost-type Pokemon appear in his room? Kyrus immediately tensed up again. Ghost-type Pokemon were extremely special beings, very rare in cities, and mostly found in remote wilderness areas because they were almost all fed by devouring the energy of other living creatures, extremely dangerous. Litwick was one of them. According to his memory, though these Pokemon looked cute, they would silently devour human souls. In other words, if he wasn't careful, his soul could be absorbed by this little guy. At this moment, Kyrus stared intently at Litwick, and Litwick looked back at him. One human and one Pokemon, eyes locked, the air fell silent. As Kyrus stepped back bit by bit, he noticed that the Litwick before him didn't seem to make any moves. Besides that, even being this close, he didn't feel any physical discomfort. So, this little guy isn't eating me. Kyrus thought carefully. This Litwick probably hadn't just arrived in his room, since during his sleep, he'd vaguely felt a bit cold. It was summer now, so that shouldn't normally happen, meaning this guy had been here for a while already. But after waking up, he felt refreshed and energetic, not at all like someone whose soul had been absorbed. Looking at Litwick again, the flame on its head was flickering weakly, as if it might go out at any moment. How could it be in this state after feasting on a soul? Considering the current situation, maybe this little guy actually had no ill intent toward him. Hello. Kyrus tentatively waved and greeted. Litwick glanced at him and responded with a soft cry. But Kyrus found he couldn't understand at all. What does it mean? Litwick called out again, voice somewhat urgent, the flame on its head twisting like an arrow pointing toward its own body. From a human perspective, that position, roughly the stomach. Kyrus immediately had a guess and asked tentatively. Are you hungry? Litwick nodded vigorously. Wait here for me, stay right there, don't move, I'll get you food right away. After saying this, Kyrus immediately turned and rushed out of the room. Litwick stood there, tilting its head, green eyes watching the direction Kyrus had gone, looking somewhat confused. Human, left. But he said there would be food. Food, that's good. So hungry. But definitely can't eat the human. Humans would feel bad. In a world full of Pokemon and trainers, Pokemon-related industries were naturally quite developed. Though Kyrus lived in a remote area of Viridian City, there was still a Pokemon goods shop downstairs. Withdrawing the money from selling 2,000 copies of his game from the platform, he walked straight into the shop and picked the most expensive ghost-type Pokemon food. This food was specially made by breeders for ghost-type Pokemon, considering their unique need for souls, and carefully formulated with special energy to provide corresponding supplementation. Though it couldn't match the effect of ghost-type Pokemon directly absorbing souls, it could satisfy their basic needs. After all, as a trainer, you couldn't really let ghost-type Pokemon go around absorbing people's souls, right? That would make you like an evil cultivator running around with soul-collecting banners, you'd get arrested by the League. After buying the food, Kyrus hurried back home and placed the container in front of Litwick. Sorry for the wait, eat up. Litwick poked its head out, curiously sniffing the black food in the container, and its eyes immediately brightened. Lit. The next moment, it buried its head right in. The food in the container began disappearing at a visible rate. This eating speed startled Kyrus. Good lord, how many days had it been starving to eat this quickly? After a full half container of food disappeared, Litwick finally stopped. The flame on its head was much more vigorous than before. It made a satisfied sound, squinting its eyes, looking at Kyrus with warmth and gratitude. Good that you're full, don't mention it. Kyrus smiled, feeling relieved. Good thing this expensive food was worth it, though one container cost over 2,000 yen, at least Litwick liked eating it. That was enough. But come to think of it, he actually couldn't understand Pokemon speech. Based on the original series, Pokemon could understand human speech, and while humans couldn't directly comprehend the detailed content of Pokemon language, they could at least get the general idea. When the relationship between trainer and Pokemon became close, this barrier would completely disappear, allowing perfect communication. But when he just heard Litwick speak, he couldn't understand at all and could only guess purely on his own. This was really quite troublesome. Just as Kyrus was pondering, a golden notification suddenly appeared before his eyes. Detected that the host has Pokemon language needs. Recommended for you, Pokemon Language Translation Module Basic. After unlocking this module, you can understand any Pokemon's language, while accurately recreating Pokemon calls and language in games to match reality. Unlocking this module requires 100 emotion points. Looking at this information, Kyrus's eyes immediately lit up. With this thing, he could understand what Litwick was saying. Not only that, but after unlocking this module, it would also be useful for future game development. This effect of perfectly recreating Pokemon calls and language could add considerable realism to games. He could even immediately add this feature to Emerald. And this module wasn't expensive either, just 100 emotion points. He had over 600 points now. With this thought, Kyrus didn't hesitate to purchase it. Purchase successful, module activated, host's remaining emotion points, 562. After scanning the notification, Kyrus looked at Litwick again and asked. Are you full? Lit. Full, thank you, human. Litwick nodded in response, and Kairos could now clearly understand the meaning in its cries. But this speech pattern, why did it feel so familiar? Kairos paused, then asked again. How long have you been in my room? Lit. Very long. Human always played with big metal thing. I waited for you to sleep, so I could eat you. This made Kairos feel somewhat chilled. Though he knew Litwick meant souls, it still sounded pretty scary. He steadied himself and continued asking. Then why didn't you eat me in the end? This time, Litwick didn't answer immediately, but thought for a moment. Lit. Because, human would feel bad. I don't want human to feel bad. Kairos was stunned. Holy crap. What was this? Had he pulled an SSR legendary good ghost? Just like stray luxury cats had the saying, hesitate and it's gone, wild Pokemon also had, hesitate and it's gone. Kairos immediately made his decision, extending a hand toward Litwick. In that case, how about following me from now on? I'll take care of all your food, so you won't go hungry and won't have to worry about absorbing other souls and making them uncomfortable. Ghost-type Pokemon absorbing souls wasn't just instinct, but also how they replenish their body's energy. But if their internal energy was kept fully replenished through other means, why would they need to eat souls? Unless they were naturally vicious ghost-type Pokemon who enjoyed devouring souls for pleasure. But obviously, the Litwick before him wasn't that type. Hearing this, its eyes immediately brightened, nodding repeatedly while happily bouncing around Kairos. Lit. Human is so good, thank you, human. Kairos smiled and reached out to pick up Litwick. Then please take care of me from now on, Litwick. Lit tilde. Unexpectedly, despite being a ghost-type Pokemon with an ethereal spirit body, Litwick felt like a soft, jelly-like mass, very comfortable. And holding it didn't feel cold at all, but actually made him feel quite warm. Warm was warm, but why was it suddenly getting hot? Kairos instinctively looked down. Oh, I was wondering what was happening, turns out my clothes had caught fire. Wait. Caught fire. The next instant, screams echoed through the rental apartment again. It's on fire ahhhhhhhhhh. 5 minutes later. Kairos dumped a pile of ashes into the trash can, having changed into an old shirt full of patches, sighing slightly. He'd forgotten that Litwick was also a fire-type Pokemon, that flame on its head wasn't just decoration. Looks like if he wanted to hold Litwick in the future, he'd need to buy some fireproof clothing. He'd also need Litwick to be more careful normally, or the house would really catch fire sooner or later. Turning around, he found Litwick had already fallen asleep against the wall. While sleeping, the flame on its head had dimmed considerably, leaving just a small point. Must be tired. Kairos thought about it and decided not to disturb him. Originally, he wanted to ask where Litwick came from, but now he should let the little guy rest properly. As for himself, he sat back down at his computer desk. The software showed that Pokemon Emerald sales had reached 2,125 copies, successfully breaking the 2,000 milestone. But this number had been stuck here for several minutes without continuing to grow. Kairos wasn't surprised. From the system's hints, Cynthia's stream should have ended, since he wasn't receiving large amounts of emotion points, just some scattered income. This should be from those 2,000 plus players who bought and were playing the game. Over 2,000 copies sold, minus platform fees, netted him just over 450,000 yen. The money shortage problem was naturally resolved. But from the moment he got the system, Kairos' goal in making games wasn't just about money. He wanted everyone in this world to experience the joy that Pokemon games could bring. Well, of course, torment was also a kind of joy, pain and pleasure combined. Collecting his thoughts, Kairos began considering his current situation. The first priority was definitely completing Pokemon Emerald and officially releasing it.